Okay, talk about the be glad not to have to use a prepper insurance. Well, I use my survivalist stuff frequently over the last 20, 25 years. I've been into the survivalist thing. Used a lot of my personal military gear on deployment where it was my personal stuff. I used guns that I had bought in the 90s yeah, I bought too many. I was one of those guys who had a lot of guns and not much of any of the other prep stuff. But what happened as time went on, all those guns turned into a relatively good investment, although there were situations where I was targeted for theft and takedown because I was known to have a lot of guns. So that could be a plus and a minus on a lot of aspects. But my Y2K preps, I would go into with some specifics now, partially because statute of limitations on a few things, right? Okay, Y2K preps, I had food, I had guns, I had all the good shit. And as we know, the Y2K thing didn't really happen. But what happened in my life on the year 2000, 2001 was I was not financially doing all that great. I'd been bouncing between some kind of uh, semi-executive jobs and kind of hit a peak in income in 2000, and then uh, my job was basically given to the son of one of the company owners, where I thought, okay, that's fine. I got transferred to another location with the company, and technically it was a promotion. But what happened was I got transferred to a really raw location for that company, and it just wasn't doing well. It wasn't doing well with that customer base. And things went downhill, and I left the company. And I went into another company where the recruiting methods and the expected pay and the compensation situation wasn't really where it should have been for me. And it just went downhill. And I was also dealing with some social issues where I was dealing in a company in a business that is primarily kind of female dominated. Advertising stuff was basically I went into existing accounts, and the business owners, it was a little bit getting to be a little bit of a kind of a rough and tumble blue collar neighborhood where we were handling a lot of accounts, and traditionally our company had a bunch of hot looking chicks working there that would go and handle those accounts. So I walk in, I tell them what business I'm from, how we need to talk about some things, and there had been some sex harassment issues of our staff by some of these people. So I got sent in to deal with some people. They said, well, let's send the big tough ex-Marine over, and they're not going to be seeing our hot-looking chicks in those businesses anymore because it was just getting too much of a harassment situation. And then they tell me, send the blonde with big tits back or we're going to close the account. And that was kind of how that went. And actually, the business ended up shutting down. Because they just got known for that. And my income went down. I got tired of being told that I couldn't deal in certain types of executive environment, mainly because of their expectations to deal with what they were dealing with. And my income went down, so I just went back to blue collar work, where a lot of political correctness and a lot of the bullshit stops because you can either hike lumber and pound nails and run a nail gun, or you can't. It's all performance oriented stuff, not how comfortable somebody decides to feel with you on the other side of the desk. But that was spotty, it's feast and famine stuff. But I had worked out, I had stayed in shape, I was able to go from white collar work to blue collar work with a relatively smooth transition. And I had collected a lot of tools as a survival prep. And I was putting a lot of tools to work. And then, so that survival prep paid off. But then my landlord, his wife, had run up $100,000 in credit card debt. He needed to sell out some of his real estate portfolio in order to take care of his wife's debts. So the house that was being sold was the one that I lived in. And it was kind of hard for me to find another rental. So I ended up living in my car for a while, and I owned so much stuff, a lot of it was my survivalist stuff, that I was paying over $600 a month in storage locker fees. And that was for a lot of my survival stuff. So I started selling it online. I opened up an eBay account. Y2K had kind of come and gone. Then I had a website, a survivalist-oriented website. I started to sell a few things on there as I was looking for another job. And I was publishing articles about, some of my expertise and some of the related subjects. This was before YouTube became a big deal. And YouTube isn't really as big with me as that old website was. And what happened was I started to sell a lot of that stuff to the point where I went from no regular job and living in my car to owning an online business, purchasing a home, not renting, being able to live in what was for a while a much more gun-friendly state. And it was all payoff. From the 2001 to 2004 period, that was all payoff from my Y2K preps. And it did pretty well. I had bought gold when it was 300 an ounce. We know what happened after that. And that was a payoff. Just in the last year, have I, used a lot of the shit hit the fan type contingency stuff? Not really, but 2 years ago, kind of had a heated discussion with my landlord about the rent. He wanted to raise the rent. It was in the middle of kind of a bad economic time. I was doing odd jobs for other property owners, and I knew I'd heard a lot of the talk from real estate investors about how there were people that owned 5 pieces of real estate, 2 were empty, 2 of them had people that were constantly late pay, and only 1 out of 5 was paying all the rent on time every month. And when they compared the ones that had to sit empty, where they still had a lot of maintenance costs and absolutely no income at all, they were feeling that sometimes the late pay, slow pay situation was preferable to that. And when, the guy was talking about kind of doing a punitive rent increase, I pointed out that I had my off-grid survival trailer as a backup plan. And if, he were to make his move, I had a backup option. So in a sense, the fact that I had a backup option that I've never used, I never lived in that off-grid survival trailer that I built or overhauled, it still served as a negotiating point where I could say, hey man, I got a backup plan. Having a lot of tools and the Pioneer trailer type stuff that you'll see in some of my other videos, I use that as a backup plan and a negotiating point with businesses where I'm not going to go to work for low wage when I have the resources to at least, I can take time off work and make myself wealthier by building stuff of my own. And that's all my survival stuff. I paid a little extra on my tools and equipment to be off-grid, shit hit the fan capable, even though I live in a city. And what I found is I could pick up work at off-grid job sites where other people can't get to work. So I did use my prepper stuff in that respect. And I think if somebody does it cleverly, put some ingenuity into the prepper stuff, the survivalist stuff, there are ways to make it pay as long as you have that goal of making these things self-supporting in some way, then it does work. And it does work as a lifestyle, and it is self-supporting the more you get well enough set up in it. So that's my video response. Yes, I do strongly believe that I've used my survivalist preps in the real world, and it's not a bad thing to have it. And there's also a lot to say about not being stressed. There's a lot of things I'm not all that badly stressed about because I know I have 6 months worth of food. I know I have backup in self-employment plans. If my employment situations don't work out that great, it's not that big of a deal. I have backup plans. I have tools and resources, very fortunately, thank God, that I am able to do things to make myself a little bit wealthier, even if my income were to drop. And so, fortunately, I feel the more further along I am as a survivalist, the better off I'll be overall. So, I don't say that stuff goes totally unused if it's set up for a little better every year as things go on.